How much would you risk to rise? Whether you are poor, downtrodden, desperate to turn the tables on a world that appears to be stacked against you, or perhaps if you are ambitious, aspiring, looking to prove your worth to the world, there are always reasons that will make you want to rise from your current position, to raise the status quo for yourself and perhaps others. Arcane, in its first batch, portrays the struggle between Piltover and its Undercity Zaun by showing us the stories of several independent characters that come from both sides. However, these stories all share a motif that is crucial for the motivations of these characters. Generally speaking, it is Zaun that seeks to rise up, to remedy the vast injustice they suffer at the hands of Piltover every single day, while the people of Piltover mostly seek to maintain their status quo, to prevent the horrible fate of being exiled to the Undercity themselves, and lose all of their privilege. However, Arcane doesn't make that differentiation quite so easy anymore, and mixes things up a little with its characters. How does Arcane do that? Well, let's take a closer look at these characters, starting with... Considering that the show starts with Vi and her gang trying to break into a lab in Piltover in an attempt to steal enough goods to improve their living conditions, it is safe to say that the group, or at least Vi herself as its leader, definitely seeks to rise up from their status in Zaun. They are also undeniably willing to risk a lot to achieve that goal, considering that the job was extremely dangerous and they knew that beforehand. Vi is almost representative of Zaun as a whole. Or perhaps at least of the Lanes, the people that have rallied behind Vander. They think that the people of Zaun should unite to stand up against the Wardens of Piltover to gain at least some increase in status, through violent means if necessary. Vi is hot-headed, impulsive and eager to prove her worth, even if that means risking herself in the process, a fact that is on display when she attempts to sacrifice herself to the Wardens to save the others. She is kept in check by Vander, whose ideology behind that we'll talk about in a second, who reminds her of the risks that are involved when she makes decisions as a leader, as all her decisions will also have consequences for those she is trying to protect. Before we talk about Vander though, it is also necessary to point out that not all members of Vi's gang seek the radical political change that she would like. Powder specifically also seeks to rise up, but not in such a grand way as the others. She simply wants to rise up in their group specifically. She wants to be useful to them, or at least stop being a burden to them, like Milo certainly perceives her to be. And without a doubt, she's also willing to risk a lot, as she risks using the extremely destructive Hextech crystals she knows very little about in an attempt to help her friends. And we all saw how that ended. Risking a lot, after all, often means losing a lot. And there's one person in particular that is very aware of that fact, and tries everything to prevent loss from happening. Let's talk about... Vander is interesting, because he kind of embodies the opposite ideology we would expect from someone living in Zaun. We mentioned that the people of Zaun are often those that seek to risk a lot to rise from their position, and Vander used to be like that, but has seen a lot of loss because of it. In the present time, the time we see him in Arcane, he actually tries to do exactly what most Pilties would do. He clings to the status quo and tries everything to maintain it, much to the dismay of the other Zaunites of the Lanes. We often see others question Vander's apparent inaction, his passivity. Vi often questions why Piltover is off limits to them, why they won't stand up for themselves, and when Vander reminds her of all she has to lose, we already can imagine that he has lost a lot, even though we do not know the specifics of his past. Of course, we know that a lot of Vander's actions are influenced by the pact he made with the Wardens, another attempt to provide him and his children with at least some safety. When many of the patrons of his bar, the people of the Lanes, call him out for his non-confrontational nature, they call him weak because of his attempt to stop himself from losing even more, and say that the old Vander never would have acted this way. And that last part is obviously true. However, Vander hasn't lost his strength. When Vi attempts to make herself the target of the Wardens, he steps in, and instead takes the blame for himself. It's only when there's no other option that he starts risking things, and to protect those he cares about, he's willing to risk everything. He's willing to give himself to the Wardens, and he's even willing to take the purple drugs when there's no other way to save Vi. Vanda's attitude drives one character in particular to infuriation. The exact opposite ideology of Vanda's is, of course, that of Silco sets himself apart because he, in contrast to pretty much all the other characters, is willing to risk absolutely anything to rise, to make his ideals become reality. We don't fully know what those ideals look like yet, but he definitely seeks to change the current situation of the Twin Cities Zaun and Piltover drastically, most likely through sowing discord and thoughts of violent revolution. From the glimpses of his past we've seen, we know that he and Vanda were once friends, both seeking to improve Zaun's position. Nowadays, however, Silco's ideas completely contrast those of Vanda's non-confrontative and non-violent ones, and Silco himself is infuriated by Vanda's unwillingness to fight for the cause they both once believed in. However, Vanda isn't actually the only character he clashes with. In a way, Silco's ideology is a more extreme version of Vi's. While Vi can be kept in check when she is reminded that she has a lot to lose, Silco spirals out of control completely as he seems to have nothing that is important to him. Vanda tries to calm Vi's ambitions for herself and all of Zaun because he is afraid that she will one day become just like Silco. Placing Vi in between Silco and Vanda is actually a really clever choice made by the show. It shows that Silco's ideals, in theory, aren't necessarily evil, as Vi shares very similar goals, but it's the extreme means he is willing to use to realize them that makes him a villain. And those extreme means are again defined by his indifference to the risks involved in his plans, making him the perfect antagonist for Vanda, who recognizes Silco as one of the biggest threats to the Zaun he has built, and for Vi, who has to find a way to hold on to her ideals without spiraling out of control like Silco. We've talked a lot about Zaun so far, as the Zaunite characters are usually those that seek to rise. But Arcane actually also has a pair of Piltover characters that risk a lot in hopes of a better future. Let's talk about both Jace and Victor are not satisfied by the status quo that Piltover presents them with. Victor, who was born in Zaun and is viewed as a cripple, is doomed to eternally be nothing more than an assistant unless he can find some way to prove his worth to Piltover. Jace, on the other hand, was born into a family with rather little power in Piltover, but I don't think that's his primary motivation for risking his position to study Hextech. From the way he is characterized so far in the show, it seems like he is merely dedicated to his studies and willing to sacrifice everything to make a breakthrough, a fact that becomes apparent when he struggles with suicidal thoughts after his research has been taken away from him. Their willingness to risk something to discover something new is often viewed with skepticism or outright hostility by the other Piltovans. They are afraid that their research into dangerous matters might threaten the status quo of Piltover, a central trait of the Topsiders. At multiple points in the show, we see them demanding punishment not really because they are just, but because they need to quell the unrest that would threaten the city if they did not condemn someone. This ideology is also represented by Heimerdinger, who, having witnessed the Rune Wars, is afraid that further research into the arcane might lead to a repetition of past horrors. Jace and Victor, however, succeed in their endeavors. The risks they went through paid off in the end. And I suspect that, in the coming episodes, we'll see a drastic change in not just how Piltover views Jace and Victor themselves, but also how they view risky scientific research. The will to rise and the risks that come with it are central themes that are spread throughout all of the characters presented in the first 3 episodes of Arcane. The show, with Jace and Victor's discovery of Hextech, reminds us that taking risks when opportunities arise can pay off greatly in the end. However, when we look below the shining city of Piltover and follow the characters in the Undercity of Zaun, things take a far more tragic turn. Arcane also reminds us that risking a lot often means losing a lot, and that big risks can have big consequences. Consequences whose full scope we'll get to see in the next few episodes of Arcane. Hey! Thank you very much for watching this retrospective of Arcane's first act. I originally had a gaming related video planned to come out sometime next week, but I basically dropped everything as soon as I had seen the first act of Arcane and started working on this. We'll probably take a closer look at the other acts as well as soon as they come out, and when we're finished with that, I'll continue working on the other video. I am super excited for the remaining episodes of Arcane. It's just such a well-made show. And I'm also excited to talk more about it. Feel free to leave your thoughts on Arcane Act 1 and predictions for the coming episodes in the comments below. Also, if you want to leave a like or subscription to tell YouTube I have worth as a person, you can do that. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you're as excited for Arcane as I am. And stay delusional.